Yeah. So hello everyone. Thanks for joining. Myself Ashwini. I'm a senior solution architect working with Epicero, and I come with 15 plus years of IT experience. I'm a MuleSoft certified developer and an architect. Also officially a MuleSoft mentor and a member who Mule, and also TOGAF certified enterprise architect. So that's a brief about me.
Thank
Hope
you,
you
Ashwini.
get benefited from this session. Yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you, Ashwini. And once again, I would like to thank you on behalf of Lucknow Meetup Group for accepting our invite and presenting this wonderful topic with us. Thank you so much. So before we start, I will just read out the safe harbor statement. So both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here. This presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. Organizer or presenter do not hold any responsibility that same solution will work for your business requirements. This presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. And housekeeping. So once the meetup is over, the recordings will be available in the meetup page within 24 hours. And you just feel free to ask whatever question you want, like utilize this time, utilize this meetup. This is very great opportunity to get all your doubts to be cleared over here. And once the meetup is over, you will get a feedback form. So please fill up that form, because that is very important for both the organizer and the speaker to give their feedback and to know, like, you can give a suggestion like what next topic you want, and we'll try to have that topic in our next event. So now over to you, Ashwin. You can share your screen. I will just stop sharing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Abhishek and team. So let's get started. Okay. So let me just put it in presentation now.
You can see as well.
Okay. So let's discuss today about what is the IT delivery gap and what solution C4 is providing and how do we get there. Okay. And what would the implementation timing look for when you're getting engaged with a client customer, and for post which we'll take questions on this topic. Okay. So as you are all aware, like this is a very common slide. Okay. So you see that IT is facing a lot of challenges these years. Okay. Technology is changing and the space between the demand and the delivery, right? Or the demand and the delivery is increasing. There's a lot of delivery gap only because of the latest or emerging technologies that is going on, right? So this challenge or the change in the timing is known as the IT delivery gap. Okay, and this gap is only going to get bigger. Okay, it's no secret that the world is changing with the new technologies, especially the emerging technologies, and it's growing at an exponential rate. You know, earlier we didn't have IoT, AI, but all of these technologies are frequently boom the market. Okay, which increases the delivery challenges, right? So how are we going to address this, right? We need to change the approach through digital transformation. Okay, we need to create reusable assets and enable the organizations with regard to the same. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to achieve this by having a new operating model, which primarily emphasizes on the consumption of assets. So when I say consumption of assets, what are we going to do? We're going to create more reusable assets. Okay, we're going to understand what is in the market and how other LOBs can benefit from the available resources. Okay, so basically, MuleSoft enables a new model for innovation, which is based upon the three core pillars. That is nothing but your people, process, and technology. People primarily focuses only on the consumption. That is where we create the C4E teams. Okay, and then process, we basically follow the MuleSoft mostly strongly recommended API-led connectivity approach. And technology, as you all are aware, we have a lot of anypoint platform. We have a control plane, we have runtime plane, we have support for GitHub, Jenkins, Azure repository, name it. Or most of the technologies are supported by MuleSoft, right? So we're going to address the delivery gap with the help of API-led connectivity and setting up C4E with the help of technology. So this is what we at MuleSoft primarily believe in, okay? So what is the difference between C4E and COE? So that we have commonly heard about Center of Excellence, right? So COE are nothing but organizational units that brings together experts to support and develop novel solutions. Okay, so they usually have physical presence in specific organization unit. Okay, the focus is basically to create capabilities, which in turn helps to create an organization value. But there are a lot of challenges or limitations of this approach. Okay, so there will be a delivery bottleneck, and sometimes it may not be up to the latest technologies. Okay, and it stifles innovation. So it means you're spending unnecessary amount of energy and resources on reinventing the wheel again and again, right? So rather than, when we compare this to a C4E model, which in turn, what it does, it basically enables federated teams within an organization to meet the local needs rather than trying to do everything from the centralized location. Okay, so how does it help? It seeks to harvest the reusable assets and best practices and then publish them for others to reuse them. It strongly believes in self-service, reuse and composability, and scalability. Okay, so the challenges which were earlier part of our COE is getting now transformed into a C4E, which creates federated teams. Okay, so what does the C4E mission look like then, right? So we know what a COE and C4E know at the moment. So primarily C4, the mission of C4E is to enable or provide discoverable assets, okay, and provide agnostic use case validation and solution assessments based on the which solution is the right fit for your client. Okay, and evangelize. So you have to build awareness within the different domains or business groups within your organization, enabling them with all what is available and what are the best practices. Okay, and you also need to govern. Okay, like you have definitely governance is very top priority of all the organizations at the moment. So you need to have security, access management, and provisioning, and mobilization. So you can expand, improve, and activate upon the assets you have already built. So these are the four key mission components of C4E in MuleSoft. Okay, so what is a C4E then? It is a team of multidisciplinary subject matter experts who enable cross-functional teams, provide design support and reusability and scalable approaches, which enables in turn in accelerating the innovation and decentralized capabilities and delivery across LOBs within your organization. Okay. Then what is C4E Federation? So we said we have to, in C4E we create federated teams, right? So it's just like a network. Within an organization is just a network. Okay. So like an application network, a federated C4E is an organizational network. Okay. So which emerges over a period of time with good, it has a lot of internal strategies you need to build. You need to have proper strategy. You need to have a sponsorship and execution to set up a C4E team within an organization. Okay. So they basically enable the whole purpose or the whole intent of having a C4E Federation is you just learn once and share everywhere. So you create assets, you promote those assets and enable the cross LOB teams to ensure they are aware such a thing really exists and they do not have to recreate the same thing again and again. Okay. So this is nothing. This team which is created will be a part of your organizational network. Okay, so you can have multiple C4E teams within your sub organizations who in turn interact with each other more frequently, right? So what in turn it does, it will not have any bottleneck for a particular individual, okay, or a group of people. Okay, so you have multiple C4E federated teams, right? So who can communicate with each other, talk to each other, enable assets, evangelize, right? And we also help in driving reuse across value streams, right? So you break down the silos, okay? And you reduce redundancy, fragility, and so what it means is you don't have to recreate. You can always extend. If something is already available, you don't have to rebuild it. So that time you can actually spend in innovation by creating more additional assets, right? And you can foster innovation, increase the speed of delivery. Okay, so this is what are the requirements or why we should go for C4E. Okay, how do you execute federation strategy? Each organization have their own federation strategies. Okay, so as I told you, you have an organization, you have the business domain or an LOB1. You have another LOB2. It can be within the same organization. Okay, you have multiple LOBs, right? So each LOB will be talking to each other, and this will in turn reduce or break this potential bottleneck of having a dependency on a single person, right? So you can actually reuse existing assets, drive additional reuse wherever possible. You can develop the business stories. You can participate in the C4E communication channels, contribute back with reusable assets, evangelize the efforts, and the cycle continues. Okay, so this is how we can execute the federation strategy in C4E. Okay. So how does the typical engagement process for setting up a C4E look like? Okay, so you need to have a discovery phase. I will definitely walk you through all the different phases in C4E. So you need to identify the team that will perform C4E within your organization. That's a new client partner. And then you need to prioritize the team onboarding. You need to develop a plan. Okay, once this complete setup is being handed over, how it's going to be taken forward, how it's going to get executed, right? How are the new teams going to get onboarded? How are we going to deliver sessions? Like how will they know what is already in store and what should they work upon, right? So continue the strategic discovery and understand, like each organization is different. They work on different business domains, right? So some may be in communications domain, some may be in healthcare domain. So based on each of the business units, business domain, and subdomains within their or LOBs within their organization, you can actually try to create federated teams. Okay, and how once you set up a C4E, how will it be continued forward, right? It's not that you create and build a C4E team and hand it over, or the client has done a setup and it should not be left there. How are they going to pick up whatever we have delivered, or how their internal team is going to pick up and work upon it, improvising that, right? So it's a continuous engagement. We need to definitely have checkpoints and create readouts, and you need to communicate and check where are we, how is the federated engagement going on, and are there any latest things which they are missing and that can be added to as part of the C4E setup. Okay, so how do we get there? Each organization again has its own way of implementing C4E for a customer. Okay, so typically we follow the 6 phases of C4E implementation. So initially we do assess and commit, and then we establish, we build and publish, then we'll allow the client, or we hand over, or we evangelize, call this as an evangelization phase, and then we will see how the consumption of the assets are taking place, and then we'll measure through the KPIs. So this is the 6 phases of C4E implementation. So let's see let's get deep into it and understand how each of the phases look like. Okay. So phase 1 is primarily to commit. Okay, so as an organization or as an enterprise, if you're trying to build up a C4E, right, within your organization, you need to have budget, you need to have a sponsorship. Okay, and you need to create a team who is going to begin the work, the groundwork. Okay, you need to obtain visibility from the senior management support, identify the team members who will be working on this implementation, incorporate C4E tasks. Okay, and then assign a C4E lead who can see how things are progressing and decide which team or organization should be part of the C4E. If you are an enterprise and if you're trying to set up C4E for the first time, and if your organization has multiple LOBs, then you probably want to have a federated C4E and each LOB having a representation for their own LOBs, right? So you can create a team, internal organization-wide C4E team. Okay. So what we do as part of phase 1 is we basically assess where we stand. As an organization, if we are starting up the C4E setup at the greenfield, at the beginning of the project, then it's very good to go. Okay, so you can always start with the best way. You don't have any bottlenecks. Okay, you always go ahead with the best practices. Okay, only thing you would need is sponsorship for setting up a C4E team. right? And a person who can drive this, right? So that's part of your phase one. So if your project, or if you're already using MuleSoft and you're midway through your development, right, or engagement, then what we do, we come up with the assessment results. So where do you exactly stand? We do have KPIs for each of the assessment results. Okay, so let me quickly bring it up and show it to you. So we can actually this assessment is based upon, let me try to, if I can bring up this Excel sheet, just give me a minute. So we have a lot of resources in Catalyst Hub, okay? So how we do the assessment of every organization, right? If you're starting afresh, then this assessment can be skipped. If your project is a greenfield project, you don't need any initial assessments, okay? All you need to know is readiness of each of these. How your project platform capabilities are there, whether you're on Cloud Hub, on-prem, hybrid, runtime fabric, okay? And what are the project baselines, and what are the C4E baselines? Okay, so we have this best practices available in our Catalyst Hub. We will go ahead with analysis of each of these. Whether your project, suppose you're in between the development, right? You're already using MuleSoft and you're in between and you want to set up a C4E at the moment. So you have to assess where do you exactly stand, right? So whether you have any point platform that's been installed, configured with all the client's environment details, best practices being followed, yeah. It's if it is up to date, if it is on-prem, if all the runtime versions are up to date, agents are up to date, authentication, authorization mechanisms, how are we implementing common logging, auditing, right? There's a huge list here, okay? So this is about security, caching mechanism, DevOps, build process, deployment process, configuration, operation model, like management, monitoring of your API services, alerting strategies, how is your support process, production support, yeah, and where is your implementation reside, right? So that's about your platform baselines, and then comes your project baselines. Okay, so what is your solution architecture look like? Do you really strictly follow API-led connectivity approach with you have experience, process, and system APIs? What is your project roadmap, change management? What type of SDLC are you using? How are you running your projects? Okay, is it agile? And what are the different domains, data mapping? Do you have design review checklist, code review checklist? What design patterns are you using? So there's a huge list in project baselines as well, okay, which covers test solutions, deployment solutions again, okay. And coming to C4E baselines, where are you storing your best practices? Do you have KPIs? How many assets are you reusing, right? How are you managing the version updates, okay? How are you sharing information? How are you onboarding new projects, right? And then how are you communicating with federated C4E teams? So this is all part of your initial assessment. So based on the priority, you have various options below baseline, to be, state, and above baseline. Okay. So this is how we basically provide our initial assessment. Okay. So let me just go back, and then you can start ahead with the C4E recommendations for your phase one. Okay, so where is it lacking and how can they overcome it, right? So the next part is about phase two, where we establish, okay, C4E model and operating model. First, we'll do the initial assessment of the organization, where they stand, and then we establish the C4E and the operating model, okay? So there we'll start defining the C4E mission. We'll identify different roles that are required for C4E, what are the different core skills required, and we start building feedback models on them, okay? So we'll try to identify, suppose we want to build a C4E team, and now we are going to establish a C4E team is what we've decided. We got a sponsorship. We have to identify how are we going to maintain our artifacts, okay? Where are we going to create our documentation? How are we going to measure the KPIs, okay? So we have to build a strategy or a plan for setting up the C4E. We basically build a detailed C4E backlog. Okay. So typically you have content management solution, okay, and SharePoint or Confluence for storing all your how your APIs are connected, talking to each other, basically your design and all of those can go into the CMS. which in turn collaborates with your exchange, anypoint exchange, where your assets or APIs and usable artifacts reside. Okay, and then the data to this obviously comes from your design, design center, your anypoints to your Mule implementations, right? And then how are you going to manage source code management? Are you going to use Git, Bitbucket? Yeah. And then where are you going to store your artifacts? Are you going to use JFrog artifactory, Nexus repository, GitHub packages? Yeah. So you have to finalize this. Okay. So how would your organization central repository look like? What will go in each of these boxes? All right. And we have a huge list of C4E suggested roles and responsibilities. Okay, you definitely need a C4E sponsor, you need a lead, you need a platform lead, integration and a platform architect. Okay, so there are various roles and responsibilities and skills associated with each of these C4E recommended roles. But it is not mandatory that your organization will require all of these roles. Okay, based on the total organization, what are the capabilities within your organization? What is a MuleSoft development LOBs? How many LOBs are using MuleSoft? You can actually create C4E roles and customize it as per your requirement. Okay, so you definitely need a DevOps person because to have CI/CD, API developer, tester. This can be combined again. API owner, So there is definitely a require between the core and LOB C4E teams to interact with each other. Okay. So basically the core C4E teams develop all the best practices and guidelines and hand it over to multiple projects, or they exchange the information between federated C4E teams. Okay. Usually the C4E leads adopt and promote enterprise best practices across the LOBs. Okay, and they share examples, they have knowledge sharing sessions. Okay, and if there are any assets which another LOB is trying to create, they will also do the same. Okay, share knowledge. Okay, so reuse the assets. Okay, create more valuable rather than this time, instead of updating an asset, it can be efficiently used in innovating other assets. Okay, and the core C4E team consumes these assets and remove any LOB specific dependencies and make them available in a generic way so that it is available for a wider audience. Okay, suppose you created for a domain called inventory domain, and you were trying to do it check in the merchandising domain. Okay, so since most of them, both of them are into retail, right, inventory and merchandising, right? So you may want to remove the inventory specific and merchandising specific data and make it more generic for any LOB to consume. Okay, so that's what the job of a C4E does actually. Okay, as part of the deliverables, you need to identify the C4E mission, create a charter, create an operating model, identify the various roles, skills, and capabilities required in your organization, create a central repository for sharing assets, understand how the feedback model would be. Suppose suppose you've done a good job, then definitely it's wonderful. Or if you want, if you think your organization would expand, as you have a vision about your organization, you may want to take those feedbacks into consideration and work upon those assets, right? So how would your feedback model look like? Okay, how would developer or project onboarding process look like? Define the KPIs and measurement plan and create C4E backlogs and continue to work upon those. Okay, so next comes our phase 3, where we build and publish assets. Okay, now we know we have done the initial assessment, we have established our core C4E team. Okay, next what? We need to identify based on the assessment and create reusable assets and best practice and guidelines. Okay, so we basically identify the assets to be created and reused across initial projects. Okay, we build and publish foundational assets and best practices. Okay, and then we define enablement process for delivery and operations team. In phase 3, we basically focus only on building, publishing foundational assets, best practices, and define enablement process for your delivery and operations team. Like how will they start consuming whatever assets the C4E team has developed. Okay, they also focus in phase 2. We also basically onboard initial project teams. We already know them, and as part of the C4E, we'll basically understand how the project team will intake. So whatever assets you've created, how will they implement this? Okay, that will be need to be considered. So for example, you'll be having best practices, you have common services, you have templates which you can create, okay? And how each LOBs take these actionable points and work upon them, okay, in real time in delivery. Okay, so usually the deliverables will contain, like for example, what are your API design best practices, RAML design best practices, logging best practices, error handling, version controlling, CI/CD, monitoring, architecture reference documents. Yeah, so the list is very huge. Okay, but this is very robust. Okay, if you already have RAML best practices, API design best practices in your organization, you may want to revisit and just get it cross-reviewed, right? Whether you have considered all the parameters, because technology is always evolving, right? And we are currently focusing on people, process, and technology. Okay, in C4E team, right? So we have to keep on optimizing it to fit all, cater to all the business requirements and all the needs with all the latest available capabilities within that technology. Okay. So the phase 3 deliverables is a huge list. So this is a complete list of all the phase 3 deliverables. Yeah. Then comes phase 4, where we evangelize. Okay. So basically, in evangelization phase, what we do is we inform and educate broader organization about the C4E and its value. Now we've created a C4E. We've built all the assets. We're going to share these assets with other LOBs. Okay. We're going to explain upon how are they going to talk to or make use of this assets which we have created, and how each team will basically know, like if a team A has built an asset and team B has also built an asset, they have to share the knowledge, right? How are you going to maintain these assets? Okay, and how will this happen? So basically you will have a lot of lunch and learn sessions, special topics, okay, multiple ways of you have knowledge sharing sessions. Okay, so there's various ways within an organization where you can actually set up this phase 4, and you also need to drive this phase 4 to ensure that multiple LOBs within your organization are aware such things really exist. Okay, so as part of your C4E phase 4 deliverables, we'll basically set up the evangelization and communication plan, and we'll try to schedule few sessions. It may be within internal to your organization or between partners or system integrators, SIs, who is setting up C4E for you. And then phase 5 is where we drive consumption. Okay, so we will try to start creating KPIs here, and then in phase 6 we'll basically monitor the KPIs. Okay, so we basically identify and harvest reusable assets, standards, and processes. We ensure teams consume the C4E assets to deliver the projects, and onboard additional project teams if required. So how do we enable reusability here? We basically design and build assets. We publish data in Exchange. We drive consumption by enabling discovery and self-service. And then we always look forward for continuous improvement, feedback. Okay. And the cycle is iterative. Okay. Next comes our phase 5. Now that we have told what we have done, we have to get it running, right? We have also explained to various LOBs that such assets exist. Please go ahead and start implementing it. You stuck, reach out to C4E team, right? So we basically we monitor the implementation of the C4E best practices on actual projects, and execution and onboarding and enablement processes for either the existing or it may be new projects, okay, within your organization. Then comes our phase 6, where we measure. So we measure the impact of C4E. We've done all the hard work in all the last 5 phases. Okay. Now we'll see in phase 5, we see how C4E is getting implemented. And we start telling success stories across LOBs and measure the KPIs. Okay. Like gather feedback for the existing assets, refine the assets based on the team's feedback, measure C4E KPIs, and develop C4E improvement and recommendations. Okay. So it's more like, you've already created the full setup for your organization, and people have started implementing your C4E best practices and guidelines. Now you will try to measure how many assets were getting reused. Okay, is there any common assets which can be generated? Okay, should the existing asset be more refined? Okay, and then we will start measuring all of these KPIs. Okay, so there are various dashboards which you can create, and you can share the results within your organization higher ups. Okay, to tell how reusability is really helping, right? And if there are any future recommendations, we could consider the same. Okay, so suggested KPIs are like guiding principles. Okay, like API reusability, number of projects using C4E assets, development time they've taken for reusing the assets, what are the total number of defects they found, what is the quality of the code, and are they adhering to the best practices or not. Right. So these are a few metrics, definitely not a complete list, but this is a good start for any organization to get started with C4E setup. Okay. Then comes our phase 6. Okay, so as part of the phase 6, as we going to, it's an iterative development process. We've done everything in phase until phase 5. Then if there is any scope of improvement, if you think an organization has something which is very core and required across LOBs, you start building assets, right? So you start creating your backlogs, monitor the KPIs. Once you build your asset, monitor the KPIs metrics dashboard. Add that asset into your metrics. Observe how many requests are coming in. What is the reusable percentage? Okay. Again, consider the C4E improvements and recommendations and further roadmap or action plan. Okay. So all this complete 4, 5, 6 stages are iterative. Okay. So what does the typical timeline look like for setting up the C4E team? Again, it depends from each organization to organization, okay? So it's good to establish C4E in the beginning and in parallel with the platform implementation, okay? So that you already have the best practices in place and all assets are readily available, okay? And they are visible to cross LOB IT teams, okay? Then you can simply get started with project onboarding, right? Um, so it totally depends whether you're already in the beginning, in between the project, or you're starting it from the green field. Okay, so the timing when you're beginning it in parallel with the platform or application development, it'll be very seamless, with very less comparative to something where you're trying to implement C4E midway through. Okay. So you need to also consider organizations realize that some form of C4E is definitely needed. Okay, if they want to make sure that the integrations are developed efficiently and effectively with emphasis on self-service and reusability. Okay. Um, so almost companies almost never have to start building a C4E from scratch because MuleSoft has already a lot of assets and their organization itself would be having multiple reusable assets. Okay. And so as I told you, C4E comes in different shapes and sizes. So the roles and C4E team structure can vary from each organization to organization in phase 2, what we defined, right? So it is totally up to us how we want to drive the C4E team. Okay, and there's a huge so that's about the different phases. Okay, so we have totally 6 phases and that covers all the 6 phases. And regarding timelines, it basically depends on how you start, on where you start setting up the C4E. Okay, we have a huge list of resources available in Catalyst Knowledge Hub. Huge list. Okay, so based on the 4 pillars you have: plan for success, establish foundation, build to scale, and measure impact. Which again build on BOT. I call this BOT, okay? Business outcomes, organization enablement, and technology delivery. Okay, so these are again the outcome-based delivery, right? So you basically have huge resources available in Catalyst Knowledge Hub. You have a C4E playbook itself available, okay, which basically establish. So it basically tells you what are the different assets available for each phase of setup of C4E within your organization. Okay, so I mean, you assess, you establish, you build and publish foundational assets, evangelize, drive consumption, and measure the impacts. Right. So all 6 phases are available, and a lot of playbooks. You don't have to start C4E setup from scratch. Trust me. Go to Catalyst Knowledge Hub. You have a huge tons of material available there. Okay, and I think that comes to the end of this